Welcome to Typography, the silent voice of society, a video series exploring how letters shape culture. In today's episode, we'll be talking about artificial intelligence in typography. I use AI for everything now, to write code, to write copies, to write emails. But there is a glaring hole in the industry. AI is not great in generating images with text on it. Whenever you try to have AI generate image, but it spells words on it, it will be misspelled. The font will look wonky. It's just not usable. It probably takes more time to take that part of the garbage off the image and compose something legible onto it than starting from scratch. The only scenario that I would use AI to generate image is to instruct them to not put any letters or text on it. But at the same time, I also find it's really difficult to compose a text layer onto a AI generated image because they're so realistic looking. It's almost demands that the typography layer also need to have some kind of realistic texture on it, which is not my style. I would just prefer they put the text onto the image correctly. So today we're going to talk about how do we navigate this glaring hole in the industry? How do we, despite how inefficient AI is in terms of typography, how do we go around it and still make it useful in typography work? The first way that I recommend to incorporate AI in typography is to use font as a base, but use some kind of icon that was generated by AI to replace the shape of the letter to enhance the meaning. For example, Tinder changed the dot of the I with a little fire icon. If you give a really clear command to AI, sometimes they can be generating an icon that is specifically for that shape. So for example, you want a dragon icon. You want it to be using it to replace part of letter, and oftentimes that letter shape would be a circle. So you can ask AI to create an icon of a circular shape, but that is a dragon. AI can generate a special icon that is especially well suited to replace part of the typography. The second way to enhance typography using AI is similar to what we have been doing, which is generate an image that complements the meaning of the typography. Give AI instruction to make it not photorealistic. Give them very specific command like, can you create an art deco style poster for this? Make sure that you mention that don't put any text on it, because sometimes they will do, especially if you give them an abstract concept. They have a hard time come up with any meaningful graphic to represent that concept, so they oftentimes would put the text on it and they would misspell it. So try to avoid that. Make sure that the graphics in a certain genre or style that complements the type. If the type is Art Deco, then you ask a Art Deco illustration of a building, of a cathedral. Also, you can ask them to create a flat graphics or black and white graphics. So that way it doesn't create a challenge for you to later on compose typography layers on top of it. They can easily kind of mush into together. So far, we have come up with putting AI-generated graphics or icons into as part of the typography. So typography is the host and the AI generated image is the guest. And we have a second way, which is reverse, where we have the AI generated image as a background and typography will sit on top of it or inside of it as the guest. Third way is kind of merging them together. There's no host-guest relationship. You give a letter shape as an input and ask AI to make them like a bubble, make them like a fire. So in a way, the generated image and the letter form combine into a new stylish letter. And then later on, you compose those letters in your design. While these ideas are a great starter for us to cope with the current landscape of artificial intelligence or the lack of in typography, I think the solution of the root problem lies in what we care so much about, which is font. The reason that AI was really great at changing code or drafting copies is because it's editing the source material. The code is a bunch of letters that we put together, and what we are outputting is what AI have access to. They have access to the raw material, and they can produce that raw material after their intelligence put into play. Similarly with drafting copies, we give them some copies and they correct their grammar, polish it, and they output the same raw material, which a bunch of text, letters. But then for images, I think they're jumping ahead because what they're feeding into it is pixels. And pixels are not the raw material to make typography. Well, sometimes you will think, yeah, it is. But actually, no. The way that normal people produce typography is using a raw material of font and text styles, those properties plus the raw font combined, you get typography. But we're not feeding AI those raw materials in terms of typography imagery generation. Instead, they're instructed to output pixel directly. They jump ahead. They didn't use the source material. So it's much harder to produce reasonable results. So I think the solution is for AI company to embrace the font, actually license font from great foundries and using that as a raw ingredient in their AI algorithm. So instead of just imagine or hallucinating pixels out of thin air, they have some intelligence to say, okay, we want to put the letter accessibility onto this photo. And in order to do that, we choose a font that is great. Based on their intelligence, they choose a reasonable font. They add reasonable text styles, the tracking, the kerning, the size, the color, the gradient, the texture, everything. And combined with all those raw materials, then you output the pixels, the final artifacts. The AI companies, this is an open plea to you to look into how people use fonts and how they typeset, and using that as a raw ingredient as well as licensed font to generate beautiful, sensible typography pieces to help us all.